Welcome to Lost in Revision. All of our content is public domain, literature, fairy tales, and folklore. Our goal is to at least break even to cover our expenses, so any support that you can offer to help us reach that goal helps keep this podcast going and you entertained. All of our music is by Nathan Hubble and is used with his permission. Thanks, and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, I apologize for the sound quality on my track. I'm in the middle of moving, so everything's echoey and I just can't get it right. Sorry we're late because everybody on the podcast has had their lives have things happen. So we're late and my sound is bad and I'm sorry. Hey everybody, welcome to Lost in Revision. I'm here as always with two of my favorite humans, Angel and Holly. How are you today, Angel?
You know, not bad. Although we are in full star testing season here in Texas, which means we are all tired and grumpy. Star is our, whole test thing. Though we did have a great time doing an eclipse watching event with all the kids last week. That was pretty cool.
Oh, I'm so jealous. And I'm so mad that I was stuck in stupid Florida during the eclipse when I should be in Oklahoma where the view was better. How's it going for you, Polly?
Well, not stuck in stupid Florida.
Good for you.
We drove up to Sykeston, Missouri to see the eclipse. We had a whole 4 minutes of darkness.
We had no darkness. No darkness for me. No darkness to make my soul happy.
I love watching the waves on the ground when it started to get close to the totality, and you could see the sun waves.
The totality.
It was pretty cool. I will say, I've got pictures that I was taking of my kids, and 5 minutes apart, you could see it went. You went from sunlight to dark. It was so cool.
I was expecting it to be darker, but it was really just like dusk. I was disappointed.
Yeah, the sun's still out.
Well, yeah, but people make such a big deal. Oh, it's dark and all the night creatures come out. I don't know. It wasn't that dark.
Oh, night creatures. One of my favorite parts of the whole event. I'm sitting there with my kids outside, in the field, and just as it got dark, a bird flew across, and one of my kids kept insisting that it was a bat, and another one kept insisting it was a bird, and they were arguing back and forth about whether it was a bat or a bird. And then the one who said it was a bird, he was like, "It wasn't a bat. Bats in Austin aren't that big. This isn't Australia."
That's great.
It did actually decide to rain in Texas a little bit this week, and that was kind of nice, which means, of course, that when it got warmer, it also got so muggy, I thought I was back in Louisiana. My gills have shriveled up a few decades ago, and I'm not used to having to breathe liquid air anymore.
Same, since I moved out of Puerto Rico.
I still live in the swamp, so it's just always damp here. There was an attempted summering a couple of days ago. It got up to the mid-80s, but now it's cold again, and I'm wearing my gloves here at my computer to record.
Okay, so, Angel, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history and culture of this story?
Okay, so this is a story by Giambattista Basile. It's an early version of Sleeping Beauty, only without fairies. Instead, there are two adorable orphan twins who save her from sleep instead of a kiss from a prince. It was first published in 1634 in Naples, Italy. It is believed that he collected the stories in his book Il Pentamerone, mostly from the areas around Crete and Venice. To be honest, until I went searching for darker stories, I had never heard of this author before. But according to Italian heritage sites, they claim that he was the first writer to use the fairy tale as a popular written form, and that many of his stories were the inspiration for much of what Charles Perrault's Mother Goose stories ended up being.
And one of the less sanitized versions of the Sleeping Beauty, it wasn't a kiss from the prince that woke her. In fact, he pretty thoroughly raped her in her comatose state, and it was birthing their twins and one of the babies suckling her finger that woke her up. 12-year-old me was horrified.
Oh, dear Lord. What sort of stories did you have access to when you were 12?
Well, let me tell you that I'm just kind of freaked out hearing the actual word rape said instead of grape because I have been on TikTok way too much lately.
He fornicated forcibly with her. Against her will. No, it was in a collection of fairy tales in the children's section at the library.
Of course it was.
The book didn't say rape. It said something like, he was overcome by her beauty and made love to her, as one does.
And this is why the 4B movement is a thing. Yeah, I've read that story too. Her baby suckled her finger and that removed the splinter, and she woke up to sudden motherhood and was happy?
I would not be.
Okay. One thing working on this podcast has taught me is I have much more of a naive inner dialogue than I ever realized. I almost never had the same subtext.
Freudian slip right there. That's staying.
I almost never have the same subtext to stories that y'all do.
I've been saying that for 20 years now, Angel. It's part of why I adore you. You're shocked whenever I make the comments that most of my friends just snort at.
So that's why you keep me around.
No, the truth comes out.
Your innocence is charming.
I laugh when the kid went to bite her finger in this one. It's such a random little kid thing to do and so realistic. I mean, how many kids just bite things?
How do we fix this problem? Well, I don't know. Put it in my mouth.
This was the first time I read a Sleeping Beauty type of story that had kids in it. So this was very different for me. I found it to be surprisingly dark, and now I'm thinking this isn't even the darkest version. So...
Not even close.
However, I will add that if we ever want to do Cinderella again, we may want to find a copy of Basile's version, because the main character is named Zozola, and she kills her first stepmother, who was then replaced by an even worse one, who goes on to have 6 daughters. So that is the version of Cinderella that inspired Robert de Simon's opera La Gatta Cenerentola.
But do they mutilate their feet and peck out eyes? Because I love the darkness of self-mutilation too. Yeah, when I was reading this, I did kind of chuckle about you choosing darker stories and me think, well, this one's pretty tame. Just some cannibalism and such.
Light cannibalism. It's like not even real cannibalism.
It's attempted cannibalism.
Yeah. Burn somebody alive.
It's intended.
Alive.
People burn people alive all the time. Have you seen the Spanish Inquisition?
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
I'm sorry, but I did think that some of the things that made this a darker version of Sleeping Beauty involved the truly evil stepmother who resorts to mutilation and tricking the king into cannibalism and burning people alive. It wasn't exactly the Disney version of Sleeping Beauty.
Well, at least they burned the right person in the end. And y'all convinced me it was goats, which is not true cannibalism. So, like I said, attempted cannibalism at best. So
yeah, she's all like, how do you like your meal? And he's like, nah.
Okay, that one was for the goat people. You made me snort. Okay, let's move on to the reading of the story and then we can discuss it after.
Sun, Moon and Talia by Giambattista Basile. It is a well-known fact that the cruel man is generally his own hangman, and he who throws stones at heaven frequently comes off with a broken head. But the reverse of the medal shows us that innocence is a shield of fig-tree wood upon which the sword of malice is broken or blunts its point, so that when a poor man fancies himself already dead and buried, he revives again in bone and flesh, as you shall hear in the story which I am going to draw from the cask of memory with the tap of my tongue. There was once a great lord who, having a daughter born to him named Talia, commanded the seers and wise men of his kingdom to come and tell him her fortune. And after various counselings, they came to the conclusion that a great peril awaited her from a piece of stalk in some flax. Thereupon he issued a command prohibiting any flax or hemp or such like thing to be brought into his house, hoping thus to avoid the danger. When Talia was grown up and was standing one day at the window, she saw an old woman pass by who was spinning. She had never seen a distaff or a spindle, and being vastly pleased with the twisting and twirling of the thread, her curiosity was so great that she made the old woman come upstairs. Then, taking the distaff in her hand, Talia began to draw out the thread, when, by mischance, a piece of stalk in the flax getting under her fingernail, she fell dead upon the ground, at which sight the old woman hobbled downstairs as quickly as she could. When the unhappy father heard of the disaster that had befallen Talia, after weeping bitterly, he placed her in that palace in the country, upon a velvet seat under a canopy of brocade, and, fastening the doors, he quitted forever the palace which had been the cause of such misfortune to him, in order to drive all remembrance of it from his mind. Now, a certain king happened to go one day to the chase, and a falcon escaping from him flew in at the window of that palace. When the king found that the bird did not return at his call, he ordered his attendants to knock at the door, thinking that the palace was inhabited. And after knocking for some time, the king ordered them to fetch a vine-dresser's ladder, wishing himself to scale the house and see what was inside. Then he mounted the ladder, and going through the whole palace, he stood aghast at not finding there any living person. At last he came to the room where Talia was lying, as if enchanted. And when the king saw her, he called to her, thinking that she was asleep, but in vain, for she still slept on, however loud he called. So, after admiring her beauty a while, the king returned home to his kingdom, where for a long time he forgot all that had happened. Meanwhile, two little twins, one a boy and the other a girl, who looked like two little jewels, wandered from I know not where into the palace and found Talia in a trance. At first they were afraid, because they tried in vain to awaken her, but, becoming bolder, the girl gently took Talia's finger into her mouth to bite it and wake her up by this means. And so it happened that the splinter of flax came out. Thereupon she seemed to awake as from a deep sleep, and when she saw those little jewels at her side, she took them to her heart, and loved them more than her life. But she wondered greatly at seeing herself quite alone in the palace with two children, and food and refreshment brought her by unseen hands. After a time the king, calling Talia to mind, took occasion one day when he went to the chase to go and see her, and when he found her awakened, and with two beautiful little creatures by her side, he was struck dumb with rapture. Then the king told Talia who he was, and they formed a great league in friendship, and he remained there for several days, promising, as he took leave, to return and fetch her. When the king went back to his own kingdom, he was forever repeating the names of Talia and the little ones, insomuch that, when he was eating, he had Talia in his mouth, and Sun and Moon, for so he named the children. Nay, even when he went to rest, he did not leave off calling on them, first one and then the other. Now, the king's stepmother had grown suspicious at his long absence at the chase, and when she heard him calling thus on Talia, Sun, and Moon, she waxed wroth and said to the king's secretary, "Hark ye, friend, you stand in great danger between the axe and the block. Tell me who it is that my stepson is enamored of, and I will make you rich. But if you conceal the truth from me, I'll make you rue it." The man, moved on the one side by fear, and on the other pricked by interest, which is a bandage to the eyes of honor, the blind of justice, and an old horseshoe to trip up good faith, told the queen the whole truth. Whereupon she sent the secretary in the king's name to Talia, saying that he wished to see the children. Then Talia sent them with great joy, but the queen commanded the cook to kill them and serve them up in various ways for her wretched stepson to eat. Now, the cook, who had a tender heart, seeing the two pretty little golden pippins, took compassion on them, and gave them to his wife, bidding her to keep them concealed. Then he killed and dressed 2 little kids in 100 different ways. When the king came, the queen quickly ordered the dishes served up, and the king fell to eating with great delight, exclaiming, "How good this is! Oh, how excellent! By the soul of my grandfather!" And the old queen all the while kept saying, "Eat away, for you know what you eat." At first the king paid no attention to what she said, but at last, hearing the music continue, he replied, I know well enough what I eat, for you brought nothing to the house." And at last, getting up in a rage, he went off to a villa at a little distance to cool his anger. Meanwhile, the queen, not satisfied with what she had done, called the secretary again, and sent him to fetch Talia, pretending that the king wished to see her. At this summons, Talia went at that very instant, longing to see the light of her eyes, and not knowing that only the smoke awaited her. But when she came before the queen, the latter said to her, with the face of a Nero and full of poison as a viper, "Welcome, madam sly cheat. Are you indeed the pretty mischief-maker? Are you the weed that has caught my son's eye and given me all this trouble?" When Talia heard this, she began to excuse herself, but the queen would not listen to a word, and having a large fire lighted in the courtyard, she commanded that Talia should be thrown into the flames. Poor Talia, seeing matters come to a bad pass, fell on her knees before the queen, and besought her to at least grant her time to take the clothes from off her back. Whereupon the queen, not so much out of pity for the unhappy girl as to get possession of her dress, which was embroidered all over with gold and pearls, said to her, "Undress yourself, I allow you." Then Talia began to undress, and as she took off each garment, she uttered an exclamation of grief, and when she had stripped off her cloak, her gown, and her jacket, and was proceeding to take off her petticoat, they seized her and were dragging her away. At that moment the king came up, and seeing the spectacle, he demanded to know the whole truth. And when he asked also for the children, and heard that his stepmother had ordered them to be killed, the unhappy king gave himself up to despair. He then ordered her to be thrown into the same fire which had been lighted for Talia, and the secretary with her, who was the handle of this cruel game, and the weaver of this wicked web. Then he was going to do the same with the cook, thinking that he had killed the children, but the cook threw himself at the king's feet, and said, Truly, Sir King, I would desire no other sinecure in return for the service I have done you than to be thrown into a furnace full of live coals. I would ask no other gratuity than the thrust of a spike. I would wish for no other amusement than to be roasted in the fire. I would desire no other privilege than to have the ashes of the cook mingled with those of a queen. But I look for no such great reward for having saved the children, and brought them back to you in spite of that wicked creature who wished to kill them. When the king heard these words, he was quite beside himself. He appeared to dream, and could not believe what his ears had heard. Then he said to the cook, "If it is true that you have saved the children, be assured I will take you from turning the spit and reward you so that you shall call yourself the happiest man in the world." As the king was speaking these words, the wife of the cook, seeing the dilemma her husband was in, brought Sun and Moon before the king, who, playing at the game of three with Talia and the other children, went round and round, kissing first one and then another. Then, giving the cook a large reward, he made him his chamberlain, and he took Talia to wife, who enjoyed a long life with her husband and the children, acknowledging that he who has luck may go to bed, and bliss will reign upon his head.
So I'm just going to pop in a real quick hag corner here, since we did discuss it a little bit right here in the middle of the podcast, and I'm just going to leave that in. So on TikTok, I've been doing the hag corners, and I've been using the Say the Weird Thing be the intro for it. And so this one was Let's Talk Cannibalism. And my point is that people, myself included, like to joke about not eating the brain when you eat people because of prions and kuru, the disease that peoples of Papua New Guinea spread from their funeral rite, which included eating the brain of the deceased. The disease never spread too far, really, because of the obvious reason that eating human brains is not a common practice worldwide. So prion diseases are not unknown around the world, but they are usually picked up from eating non-human animals. And the main argument against cannibalism is that if you eat your own species, you are susceptible to every single disease they have, instead of only the more rare cross-species diseases that we share with the animals that we normally source our meat from, like birds and bovines. So in closing, cannibalism is bad because of disease, not just societal norms.
One of the most chilling examples of cannibalism that I've found in literature is in the book Lucifer's Hammer. Okay, comet hits the earth, it's the end of the world. People are just trying to survive. So there's not a lot of food, so people are eating each other. So then there's this
As you do.
As you do. Then there's this I think it was the Reverend Armitage, who came along and he found the cannibals, and he's like, "Look, yo, you're doing it wrong. You're eating the sick people. That's why y'all are getting sick. You gotta stop eating the sick people. Let's just eat the non-believers."
That's exactly what Hag Corner is going to be about. I mean, not about believers, but about not eating sick people.
He created this whole cult where they go around and either you convert or you're dinner. He ended up being like one of the major baddies at the end when they had the war at the end.
Good night. Okay.
I love the Reverend Armitage character. He's so just chillingly bad. He's like, he was a televangelist before the comet hit.
Of course he was.
Sounds about right.
So his personality is so dynamic, and he could just control people.
Yes, that's what happens with with evil people frequently in real life.
Yeah.
And that concludes Hag Corner. So we are back, and what is your favorite part or version of this story?
Well, I think I kind of liked that she wasn't lying there for 100 years. In the story that read as a kid, it was the whole everybody ended up asleep, not just the princess. And I always felt sorry for all of the innocent servants who were just doing their jobs and then whammo, it's 100 years later.
Yeah, I like that Disney left that out.
In some of those, the entire Disney didn't leave.
No, it was not 100 years
It wasn't
because
100 years.
Prince Stefan
No,
was the
okay, you're
same.
right. Yeah, in a lot of versions, the entire town went to sleep. So I'm like, how
Like
did
the whole kingdom.
Yeah. Not even town, kingdom. You're right. In some of them, it was town. Some of them, it was castle. Some of it was kingdom. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. It's nice to not wake up 100 years later. Though,
Well, they even referenced that. Terry Pratchett referenced that in one of his books about the witches. They had to take the kingdom out of reality for 100 years so that the princess could grow up.
Yes, that was the Granny Og story, right?
Yeah, well, one of them.
Yeah.
It was the one with Magrat where the
Well, I mean, there's usually all 3 to 4 witches involved in Terry's books.
I think it was Magrat's daughter was the one that had to grow up.
It's been a while.
So it was like it wasn't the first witches book.
No, they're all great though.
Because in the first one, Magrat got married to the prince. But, I gotta say, I like this version much better than the version where the Prince Charming finds her sleeping and has sex with her, because that's super cringe.
Ew.
And then she wakes up giving birth to twins. So, yeah, I like this version better.
Oh, yeah, I really don't want to read that version. Just, ew.
I gotta say, though, I have had a hay splinter under my fingernail, hazard of having farm animals, and I can sympathize with poor Talia dropping dead. My whole hand hurts just thinking about it. Hay splinters under your fingernails.
Ooh. It just made me think she must have been horribly allergic to hemp and went into anaphylaxis.
Yeah, magic anaphylaxis.
But I mean, I guess back then, or when this was set in that time period, they could have mistaken anaphylaxis for death and then left her in the palace. So, on that favorite part or version, what's your least favorite part or version?
I thought it was a little unrealistic that the king climbed a ladder, peeped in on this beautiful sleeping woman, and then was like, "Heh, whatever," and went away and forgot all about her.
Are you really surprised, though?
I am, because the guy saw the beautiful woman and he was like, meh, and he left.
Yeah, but when he comes around that way hunting again, he was like, I wonder if she's still there. What really bothered me was that once she was awake, she never thought of trying to find her father. That poor man never found out that his daughter wasn't actually dead. Although it also bothered me that it never explained why his stepmother, the other king's stepmother, hated him so much.
I don't think she hated him so much as she benefited more from him being unmarried so that she could get to act like the queen. And if a real one got crowned, who knows what would happen to her. In all these stories, it's nothing good.
Yeah. She didn't actually care about him.
Okay, wow. Murdering children just to keep a cushy position. Yeah, she earned the flames.
And that's literally happening right now with all sorts of leaders of current countries, because humans remain the worst creatures on earth.
Now and forever. Before.
So, moving on to happier stuff, maybe. What are the original lessons that this story was trying to convey?
So, always wear gloves when spinning flax? Makes me think of the Fincairn Flax song, where they talk about their hands being all torn up. Or don't cheat on your wife with comatose princesses. That's a good one. I read that it was his wife in a different version, not his stepmother or mother-in-law. In some versions, it's his mother, not his wife. So maybe it's a mommy dearest thing instead of a cheating husband thing.
You never can tell with fairy tales. The wearing gloves thing would have saved so many young girls from loveless royal marriages that include them raising a grown man and mothering the king.
I will never understand why men are so tied up in being mothered. Grow up already.
You know, the wearing
Amen.
gloves thing would still save so many young girls from lots of things.
How would gloves save the girls?
No glove, no love.
Oh, those gloves. Angel made a sexy joke.
Oh, God. I think the intended lesson was simply the evil you wish on others will find its way back to you. So it is actually very self-serving to treat others with kindness. So you get, that's how you get the good stuff.
That's how I get the good stuff.
Oh, that's totally me. Selfish. All my acts of kindness are completely self-serving. The truth is out.
Technically, they all are, because society would collapse without them. Kindness and selflessness evolved and caused society. Otherwise, humans would be extinct. Kind of too bad it isn't universal enough to make human society enjoyable.
Yeah, be nice, people. Come on.
Would be nice.
Humans. So, that's why I have a very short list of humans that I like. So what do you think the modern lesson would be? Like, don't leave your kids alone in a coma in an abandoned palace? Giving Rick in The Walking Dead vibes for me. And random kids showing up right after a strange dude visited? Sure. Showed up.
I think part of the modern lesson could be know where your food comes from before you start eating. There is no telling what has been going on in that kitchen.
Yeah, I don't even eat out because I don't know the hygiene of people making my food, unless it's Polly at Waffle House.
I have had a few customers who wouldn't order unless I was cooking it, so that's fair.
So, in closing, what do you think happened after the story?
I hope she finally stopped being such a happy airhead and remembered that she had a father that might like to know that she's still alive. That's going to bother me forever.
Well, he abandoned her.
He thought she was dead.
Yeah, he thought she was dead. He entombed her and went away in grief.
They probably didn't have barbecue for a while. I hear that smell sticks with you.
So I've heard long pork is pretty tasty if you just avoid the brain.
Well, she didn't have much of a brain.
Real.
Thanks for joining us today. Check us out on Patreon. You can help us meet our small goal of breaking even and covering our expenses. Your support helps pay for all of the things that podcasting requires and helps keep this show alive and growing. If you can't afford to support us financially, go give us a good review, subscribe or follow, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to fact check us and offer suggestions to make our show better for you. You can also send us an email at lostinrevisionpodcast@gmail.com.
There's a lot more waiting for us all at the end of the road.